All right, our next slammer is a research director and a renowned biologist and educator. She served on the faculties of Hampton University and Elizabeth City State University biology departments before moving to NSU in 2003. Most recently, she was interviewed by the History Makers, and her interview is now part of the Library of Congress. Yeah. She's a North Carolina State and Virginia Tech alumnus. Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Camellia Moses Okpodu.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, come on. Are you having fun?
Yeah.
Me too. I wanted to say I'm really honored to be here with you tonight. I have notes because as a professor, you don't do, this is something you don't do. You don't give us a microphone and you don't put us in front of an audience because we don't know when to stop. So I'm also ADHD, so I have to have notes, so there's no telling where the story may go. I met Kim in the cleaners, and I don't know if you know Kim or not, but she is a force of nature. And I was saying to her I was going to take some of the flyers and distribute them on campus at the Norfolk State University on the Atlantic, where we achieve with excellence beyond measure with infinite possibilities. But she said, no, I need another person. And I was like, oh, but I'll do that for you next year. She says, no, you're going to do it this year. I was like, I've never told a story, but I thought about it. Well, as a biochemist, I tell stories all the time. It's just, I do limited rate reactions and things like that. I promise not to do any of that tonight. My name is Camellia Grace Moses Okpodu. I'm from rural North Carolina. Everybody sees my name and they think I'm from Nigeria. My joke is that I kept my name, my last name. I was married to a Nigerian, Samuel Okpodu, who's a world-class soccer player and FIFA, whatever he does internationally. And as an ex-wife, I kept the name so that his new wife will understand that I was the first Miss Okpodu. Really seriously. The real reason is that once you publish, it's kind of hard for you to change your name. So, and I also was raising the girls by myself. I'm the mother of 3 daughters. And before I move on, I want to show you something that I'm wearing. I've been wearing it since last May. This is, and people ask me all the time, are you sick or whatever, but this is to represent that, I don't know if you can see it, it's an invisible band I wear. In Nigeria, we have a problem that the world kind of has talked about a little bit, but we have some daughters that have been missing since last April. And so I just want to, as I figure, this is my protest because those daughters are invisible. And so I'm wearing this unless it falls off until those girls are returned. And I actually have a friend who had to leave Chicago and go back to Nigeria because one of his nieces in the village where his family was one of the schoolgirls, and they don't know where she is. So I wear this to remind myself, to remind you that, you know, that is something that we need to talk about and continue so it doesn't happen. I would be remiss as a mother of 3 daughters to not say that. But I want to talk about my girls because they really shaped who I've become as a woman and as a mother. And I hear a lot of controversy in the news media about people who were in corporal punishment. And I didn't grow up that way. And when I was on Oprah, yeah, I got to meet Oprah. And she interviewed me, and I told Oprah, I said, you know, my mother never beat me. And she looked at me and she said, you're a black child in America and you never got a beat? Yeah, my mother talked to me and reasoned with me, and I got it. Then I told her, I said, well, Miss Winfrey, it's not that my mother didn't beat people. She just didn't have to beat me. I got when she told me to do something because my mother's about this tall and I seen her backslap my brother. So I realized that I needed to, if she could, and my brother's like 6 foot tall. So I thought my mother was crazy personally. So I wasn't about to go against her when she told me. But she very rarely punished us. You had to really do something to get her back, you know, to get in trouble with her. And I realized that part of the reason was that her childhood. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that because the reason why I gave this story, the name arose by any other name, not necessarily necessarily be a rose. It might smell sweet, but it might not be a rose. Back to my daughters. I have 3 of them. Elizabeth is my middle daughter, who I'll spend time talking most of the story about. My oldest daughter, Camellia, is a PhD student working on her doctorate in biophysics at Howard University, and just recently gave me my first grandchild. And his name is Daniel Maximus. Right? Yeah, he was close to 10 pounds, so we were like, we gotta try to name this child Maximus. And my youngest daughter, Corinne Grace, both of my younger 2 went to Norfolk Collegiate, graduated, and she's at Mary Baldwin College, and she's an accomplished, thank you, I expect lots of votes from you. She's an accomplished musician, and she has a SoundCloud. I was told that if I'm going to tell the story, I had to tell you guys that. If not, I couldn't do it because the girls don't like for me to talk about them. But she has a SoundCloud, and where she has her music, and go listen and support her local artist, Corinne, K-O-R-E-N, Grace. Okay. My ex-husband told me before we had children, that in his culture, he's from a small ethnic group in Nigeria called Urobo. Everybody knows about Yoruba, but he's from Urobo. U-H-O-R-O-B-O. Look it up, it's a real language. But they have a naming process. You just can't name a child, like, I'm gonna name the baby Ashley when no, he told me no, can't do that. We have to wait till we see the children. And we're not allowed to know the sex of the child. Whatever God wants to give us is what we have to deal with. So even though they had the level 2 ultrasounds, we didn't do any of that. I had to wait to figure out, what nature had provided. And he said, when we see them, we must give them some honorable name from someone in our families that we want the child to have those morals and characteristics of. So the whole time I was pregnant, I assumed that my second child, Elizabeth, eventually, but I assumed it was a boy. This child kicked me nonstop. It was such a different pregnancy from the first pregnancy that I said, oh, can't be another girl, because this pregnancy, she moved all the time, I couldn't sleep. She cut off the circulation to my legs. It was really interesting. So when she was born, I should have been kind of a flag, right? But I was in for a lot. But when she was born, I was surprised because I thought, oh, it's going to be a boy. So I had thought about, well, we'll name it after either my brother, my oldest brother. And so I was stuck. This girl, a beautiful baby. I said, well, he said if we named it after, when we saw her, we had to name it after somebody who's noble in our family. So I named her Elizabeth in honor of my mother. My mother is the sweetest person you'll ever meet. She's from rural North Carolina, where they talk like this, hey y'all, and she never raises her voice. And she's so sacred that my daughters have named her Pumpkin. So they have everybody down in Wilmington, on the other side of Wilmington, call my mom Pumpkin. So I was like, I can't go wrong if I name her Pumpkin. So I named her Elizabeth. He sees the baby, he names her Ese Agune. Ese Agune is a Nigerian name that translates, I found out 6 months later, so her name is Elizabeth Ese Agune. I found out later that basically we named this child Elizabeth. I'm thinking, well, I've really done a good job, because he's told me that if you name her after somebody who's noble in the family, that's a good thing. So hey, she got my mother's name twice. Okay? So as Elizabeth begins to mature and grow as a baby, she was very interesting. At 7 months, she started walking. So I was like, babies at 7 months should be walking, right? It was really interesting. At 10 months, you know how they tell you, the pediatrician says, oh, the baby's going to say 1 word, and then they'll say 2 words, and they'll say 3 words, and eventually, by the time they're 2, they'll start talking in little sentences. Not Elizabeth at 10 months old, I gave her baby food, and we had fufu. I don't know if you've ever had a Nigerian food where we eat with our hands, right? So we're all sitting to the table, she's in her high chair, and she's looking at us. And she looks at me and she says, I'm hungry. Give me some. At 10 months, I was like, oh my Lord. And I looked at my husband and I said, this is not normal, okay? So we had her tested at Tech. I was actually at Virginia Tech. I was actually on the faculty. I didn't graduate from there. I graduated from NC State, but that was my first job. So I took her over to the psychology department, and they told me, like, do this with her and do that. You know, they gave me, because I wasn't sure. It's like, what is this baby? What is she going to do next? She going to come to the lab and work with me? So they told me what to watch out for. So we fast forward, Elizabeth's time, she's 3.5. We moved from, things didn't work out with my husband and I come down with the girls to Hampton, and I put them in school, I take her her papers and everything, and I was like trying to enroll her in like just a normal, you know, daycare. And they were like, no, she needs to go to school. This paper said she needs to go to school. I was like, she's 3.5. She doesn't need to be in school. She acts like a 3.5-year-old. I don't care how smart she is, but she's 3.5. Oh no, Dr. Okpodu, you're really going to be doing a disservice if you don't let her go to school. So I listened to them because they're the experts. I put this child in school and they kicked her out. They called me every day, Dr. Okpodu, I'm in the middle of a lecture. Dr. Okpodu, can you come down to the school? Elizabeth's on top of the table. Elizabeth is under the table. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed because, you know, they think I don't do anything with this child, right? So after 3 schools, I finally broke down and said, okay, I only know of one possible solution. My mother's not here. I don't have any family in this area. As much as I don't want to do this, I went to the Catholic Church and enrolled them at St. Mary's Star of the Sea. Probably the best decision of my life. The nuns did not play. So I had that other parent that helped me with this. So one day, one thing you do not want to hear, I remember all the horror stories my brothers and sisters used to tell me about Catholic school. I never had that privilege. I went through public education. But I get a phone call, can you come to the principal's office? Sister Mary Sharon and Sister Mary Blanchett wanted to talk to me. So I was like, really, I felt like a little kid, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I was like, oh my God, what is Elizabeth doing now? She gets kicked out of this school. I don't know what we're going to do. I guess I'll have to send her to boarding school, which is what they do in Nigeria anyway. So I get in the office and the lady says, so Dr. Okpodu, how do you discipline your children? I said, well, I put them in timeout and I take things from them and they're privileged. And she looked at me and she said, well, that may work for your other 2 children, but Elizabeth, you need to be her. He said, excuse me? She said, yes, she needs a be. Okay. And so I really couldn't wrap my head around this. I tried doing what the nuns told me to do, and I honestly could not do it. I didn't grow up with this as a model, so I didn't know how to do it. So I figured out, well, I know what I'll do. I'll make them busy all the time, so I put her in athletics. And so Elizabeth did basketball, track, field, whatever I could think of. And I want to take this time to give honor and thanks to the chief of police, Goldsmith, because he was her, when she was at Christ the King, he was her basketball coach. Chris Butler was her soccer coach. I don't know, these very strong men in the community. And Chris Liebert, who's now at the University of North Carolina, Cape Fear College, where she went for a year, 2 years, got her in shape, and she's doing quite well. So after we, get through adolescence, we get to about 14. I'm thinking, I'm done, good job, she's busy. She goes to Norfolk Collegiate and she loses her mind. So she started, everything I told her, she wanted to do the opposite of. You know, teenagers. And I wasn't used to this because my other daughter did what I told her to do. You know, I said, get a PhD. She said, okay. So Elizabeth challenged me. And I never forget this. You know, when they're in like 10th grade, I was like, if you're 10th grade, your curfew is 10 o'clock. So 10th grade, Elizabeth decides that her curfew is at 12, because the other kids that she was hanging out with, their curfew was at 12. So I remember that night I was beside myself, she didn't come home. And I was thinking, you know, where did I go wrong? I've done everything, you know, I tried to do my best. So she comes home and I'm relieved, and I tell her to go to her room, and I decide I'm going to call my mother, because after all, I named this child in honor of my mother must know what to do. So I called Pumpkin, and I was like, you know, I don't know what to do with Elizabeth. I mean, she doesn't listen to anything I tell her. And my mother, in her little sweet voice, she says, well, you can't get through better days until you make it through the night. It's like, she's not going to quote to me Randy Crawford or some singer, Diana Reeves or somebody. I don't need that. You didn't tell me what to do. I said, well, how were you as a child? She said, I was bad. Oh, God. I named this child Elizabeth. Now you tell me you're bad? So but you have to understand, you have to convince Elizabeth. She's a smart child. She said, when I was her age, I burned down the barn and the community, and I set the whole woods on fire. I did what? She said, yeah. She said, but here's the difference. She said, my mother didn't beat me. My community embraced me. And they explained to me, because I thought at 12 I knew how to burn off the yard, and I just ended up burning up everything. She said, but I had to pay restitution, and they didn't throw me in juvenile. They actually pulled me closer and explained to me what my actions, they were just happy that I didn't kill somebody. She said, what you have to learn to do, you have to learn to be both parents for Elizabeth. What does she mean? She said, you have to participate in her life, always be available to her, R, be reliable, E, endure, don't just give up, no, throw up your hands, and be a never-ending teachable source for her, and she'll begin to trust you. And she said, you're not going to get that through beating somebody. She said, you know, a rose by any other name may smell as sweet, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a rose. She said, your problem is you're trying to make Elizabeth be like your other two. You know, let Elizabeth be Elizabeth. Best advice my mother could have ever given me. I'm happy to tell you that Elizabeth is doing really well. I followed my mother's advice. I really made the effort to be present with them. The girls would tell you I drove them everywhere. I went to dances. I was the chaperone. I was the parent. I made sure that I was present, and they knew that they could talk to me. Sometimes they would tell me things I did not want to hear, but I would listen and then go in my room and go, oh my God. You know, I always left that door open. Right now the girls will call me. They're 28, 22, and 20. And Elizabeth is doing quite well. And I think my mother is exactly right. When you have a child that's like that, who has the courage to go against the grain, what you can't do is beat it out of them. What you have to do is figure out how to embrace them so they become that virtuous person that you have named them in honor of. And so I'm really glad that Elizabeth is now working on a master's. She just told me, oh, I've applied for, although I'm paying for this. I'm planning to get my master's in environmental science at UNCW. So a rose by any other name, eventually it's funny if you realize that you just need to let the child be who they're meant to be.